Tonight is Wednesday, November 7th, 2012, and it's a continuation of the meeting that we started on Tuesday, November 6th, 2012. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. For which you stand. With liberty. Okay, Kate, could we have roll call, please?
Certainly. Right. Dennis Knudsen?
Here.
Michelle Shannon?
Here.
Don Williams?
Here.
Patrick Evans is excused. Doug Bryson?
Here.
Sean Kidd?
Here.
Eric Fearborn?
Here. Okay, folks, like I mentioned earlier, thanks for coming, and this is a continuation of the meeting that we had last night. I'd like to get a show of hands. Are there anybody here new this evening that wishes to speak? Everybody was here? Oh, okay. Well, let me, thank you very much. Because we do have some new people then, you get to listen to me read this. Now is the time for other public testimony. Before we begin, I will state the procedures we will follow for taking and giving testimony. First, I will call in chronological order the names of those who have signed up to speak on the sign-up sheet located at the entry table by the door. After that, I will ask for a show of hands by any who did not sign up and want to speak. Finally, I will ask for testimony from other public agencies. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. If you are speaking for a group of people present, your time may be extended depending on the number of people you represent, but your limit will be 15 minutes unless the Planning Commission extends the time. Please advise the chair if you are speaking for other people. You may ask us questions, but we will not have a back-and-forth discussion. As time allows, I may direct staff to follow up on your questions before the end of the hearing. If the Planning Commissioners have questions of you, we will wait until you finish speaking and then ask our questions. Time spent answering our questions will not be counted in your time limit. Please come forward when your name is called and state your name for the record. If you want a copy of any decision made by the Planning Commission, also give your mailing address. Please avoid repeating other comments. If one person is speaking for a group of people, individuals in that group do not need to repeat the same testimony. Okay. The microphones in this room have a narrow range. If you want us and the television audience to hear you, speak directly into the microphone. Also be aware that the acoustics in this room are sensitive. Even if you are whispering to your neighbor, that sound travels all the way to the front of the room and can prevent others from hearing your speaker. Also, you're free to come and go as you wish, and there's restrooms down the hall and all that good stuff there. Again, please a reminder to please turn off your cell phones if you haven't already. They can be very distracting during testimony. Okay, I'm going to call. We just have a handful of people this evening. So, is it Ruth Squires? Did you plan on speaking tonight? Ruth here? Okay, Jim Stovall? Yeah, didn't you speak last night, Mr. Stovall?
Yes, I have a comment about that. If give the rest of the comment, put on the record.
Okay.
My name is Jim Stovall, a Rhodes End resident since 1998. Last night, I brought 51 letters from Rhodes End property owners opposing annexation and presented them for the record. Most of those people were not able to be here, and therefore I felt I should have been allowed more than the 3 minutes. What I have to give tonight will probably take about 2 more minutes.
Okay.
My presentation echoed many of the points made by these people in their letters, but not all of their points. Even though I was representing numerous people, other than myself, I should have had some extended time. I was denied that chance last night, due to the time limit. I had rehearsed my presentation to be sure to clock in at under 3 minutes. Evidently, I didn't make it, but thank you for allowing me to finish tonight. I know it would be impossible for you to read all 51 letters from last night in the course of this hearing, but I hope you've had a chance to at least sample a few of them. These are very personal testimonials about how these people feel about the shabby way they've been treated by the city in its quest to annex Rhodes End. So I am offering, in addition to my written and oral testimony, a one-page excerpts from selected letters to the council for your possible use. I would be happy to read just a few of them now if you wish, but I will defer to your decision on that. In any event, I will give a copy to your staff for your review. The final point I planned to make at the end of my testimony last night was this. A common theme in these letters is the desire to be asked what they want, and that is a democratic vote to determine if the majority of Rhodes End property owners really want to be annexed. If Lincoln City can make a compelling case to advocate for annexation, we'd like to hear it. They might be surprised at the outcome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And you can give that to Kate, please. Thank you very much.
I got a question for you real quick. I did have an opportunity to read some of the letters, and I just wanted to follow up with it. It seems like there's a common theme that I wanted to get your opinion, or actually what you think the people you represent are saying with this, and that is it your contention that the city has the obligation to continue providing the water? And we've had testimony last night where people saying we don't want it, we don't want your services. What are the people that you represent? What is their position on that?
Well, I think I can speak pretty close to the official point of view out there. We believe that the water service should be granted in perpetuity. It was a pre-existing service. The water service that the Rhodes End Water District had was turned over lock, stock, and barrel to Lincoln City as a fully functional and up-to-date system. So the 25-year limitation was something imposed by law, is my understanding. And the fact that those 25 years elapsed with no progress, as Mr. Hawker would have it in today's paper, we have made efforts to communicate with the city about the possibility of extending the service for a short time so that we can explore other possibilities. There are options such as wells and reservoirs that we could install ourselves, but the city has frustrated those efforts in every possible way, refusing documents or getting in the way of land use permits and that sort of thing. And they've been antagonistic, as I said last night, to every effort to communicate with them about a short-term extension of the water under some reasonable time limit to give us a chance to explore those other options.
All right. And then have y'all looked into some of these other options in the past several years, or is this something that's...
I haven't personally, but I have heard of some such studies and preliminary reports, but I don't have those at hand.
All right.
Anything else?
Thank you. Thank you very much. David Eakham.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is David Aiken, and my wife, Sue, and I have owned property, a house at 6518 Logan Road in Rhodes End. We live in the Tri-Cities, Washington, particularly in Richland, Washington. And the issue of annexation is, I think we all know, is an important issue, a very important issue. My wife and I traveled over 300 miles from our home in Richland to come down just for these hearings last night and tonight. And before we bought our property in Rhodes End, we looked at property all the way starting north at Gerhardt, north of Seaside, to Newport, and in every city and every town in between. And one of the major considerations that we looked at were rules and regulations of the city, zoning, and how friendly the city was to people that live there. And I would encourage major consideration I would encourage the Commission to look at what happens in other cities and other towns and what their zoning and what their regulations have done, because quite frankly there's some of the cities that we looked at that we would not buy property in, we would not live in because of the zonings and regulations that they have. And sometimes these regulations and zonings are put in place with good intentions. People think, they look at them and they say, hey, this makes sense, and maybe even the people say, hey, this makes sense, but a lot of times they'll end up having the opposite effect of what they were meant to do in the first place. With that said, let me start by saying I'm not necessarily against annexation or opposed to annexation if it's done correctly, and if it would result in benefits to be expected that normally being annexed into the city would have. However, I'm opposed to the strong arm method that has been used in the promise of no real improvements to Rhodes End. The city manager has repeatedly stated that Rhodes End will be annexed, whether it is wanted by the people or not. The city manager has defiantly said that he can and will annex Rhodes End by whatever methods and means are necessary, including those that are underhanded, ruthless, non-cordial, and even border on across the line of being legal. As we can clearly see from the testimony that was given last night, this so-called annexation process has been onerous and malicious at every step. Even the date set for the Planning Commission meeting and the time's up.
Yeah, please wrap it up if you can, please.
What's that?
Just wrap it up with a sentence if you can.
Okay. I would encourage you to take these concerns into consideration and do what's right for Lincoln City and what's right for Rhodes End. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Aiken, your concern, I know you didn't quite have the time to do it, so I just wanted to get it on the record. Is it more of the zoning and how it affects your property? As do you use your property as a VRD, or is it your vacation home, or both? Both. It's our vacation home, and we also rent it out. So are you more concerned with the water issue, or are you more concerned with how that would affect your home on the VRD issue? We're concerned about zoning from the regulations that might come into place regarding as a vacation rental. Okay. And there's been other cities on the Oregon coast that have, again, implemented certain regulations on vacation dwellings that make it so, what word do I want to use? So difficult that it's, again, you wouldn't want to live in those cities, you wouldn't want to own property in those cities, and it's had the opposite effect of what you would think that would have. Okay, I just want to make sure we had your which concern you had on the record. So. Right, and the use of vacation rental properties, as I see it, it's a family deal. The whole family comes down, enjoys a vacation, and then the next time that Grandpa and Grandma want to take off and go somewhere, hey, they remember that they've been at such and such a city. We had a good time there. We'll go back as a couple, stay in a motel, and whatnot. Mom and Dad might want to get away for an anniversary. They'll do the same. The kids growing up will come back to that city. They won't go someplace else. So. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mary Caskey.
My name is Mary Caskey, and I live in Rhodes End. I was here last night, but I didn't talk. So, my main thing tonight is Logan Road. They gave the...
Can you pull the microphone down a little bit, please? Thank you very much.
Is that better?
Yes.
They brought up Logan Road last night, and they made it sound like the city paved it for Rhodes End residents, and that is not true. the county paved it, and then the city took from 101 to 50th Street, and the rest is still Rhodes End, owned by the county. And it kind of irritated me that they were putting it on like they did it for us. And that was not why it was done. It was done for them. And they said that they had to do it because of 2% of people in Rhodes End are using it. When it's on the busiest corner in the city. The other things that they were pretty fair about, and I will agree with this, library, fire district, college district, schools, medical. They make it sound off the beaten path like we're not paying our fair share. And we are. We're paying what everyone else is paying in the county. And I don't think Lincoln City pays extra on all those than what we do. I agree, when I go to the community center, I have to pay extra fees, and I've never complained about that. But that was one of the only things on their list that I could see that I might be gouging them. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Jerry Woods.
Good evening.
You okay?
I'm okay. Don't start yet. Okay. I'm Jerry Woods. I live at 1835 50th Northwest. Last night the question was asked, are the consents available in PDF files? And the answer from the city attorney was no. I'd like to rephrase the question. Are the consents available from the city in any electronic format? Second point I have is that the city obviously had to do a lot of work summarizing the detail of the consents. Otherwise, the fine presentation that you made, Mr. Townsend, showing totals and percentages wouldn't have been possible. So the detail must exist in a database or spreadsheet files or something of that nature, and we would like a copy of that detail. The detail should include, at minimum, the owner name, the property address, the tax map lot, and the date signed and the date filed with the county. I'd like to point out that I've often received a lot of data from the county assessor, thousands of rows of data and lots of columns, and it cost me $15. So again, we'd like to have a copy of the detail from your database or your spreadsheet. And I think that does it for tonight. Thank you for listening to me.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Okay, Roger Middleton.
My name is Roger Middleton. I live at 7554 Northeast Neptune Drive. I want you to imagine that there are very few houses in Rhodes End, just hypothetically. The area is virtually undeveloped. Some people have started to buy lots there with the intention of building. They come to the city and say, we need water and sewer. And the city realizes that they have an opportunity to serve and to increase their tax base. So they enter into negotiations. And they tell those residents, if you'll sign consents to annexation, we'll be happy to serve you with water. The residents are happy, the city's happy, everyone goes back, and they begin to build those homes. That is the situation that the Oregon legislature envisioned when they passed the law allowing consents to annexation to be collected. they did not anticipate that a city, which, by the way, back in the 70s, voiced no interest in annexing Rhodes End whatsoever. In fact, the city manager sent letters to the state health division head stating that in spite of the health division director having directed Lincoln City to annex Rhodes End in order to alleviate their problems, the city was not interested and could not afford that. Now, I've read the statutes, and I've read everything I can get my hands on that relates to that period, and I have yet to find a single statement on behalf of the city or on behalf of anyone in Rhodes End which said, you know that we will annex you down the road. It was not discussed. Now, I will absolutely shut up on this issue the moment a document is presented to me that indicates that such a conversation went on, or that everyone should have known this would happen. This is the kind of logic which accompanies these statements that says everybody knows that so-and-so. There is another everybody knows statement that's going around, and it is that the intent of the legislature was to allow annexations to be collected after service had been provided. No such thing. The legislature did not intend that. Now, I know you have consciences, or you wouldn't be sitting here. You volunteered to serve your city, and I salute you for that. I depend on your consciences to help you ask a question. How can the city be clothing itself in a law which the legislature passed for precisely different reasons than are occurring?
Middleton.
Mr. Middleton, he has a question for you.
Is my thing on?
Yes.
All right. Just a quick follow-up. Under your hypothetical that you gave, let's say that the undeveloped lots that are in Rhodes End now, someone buys that lot, or the person who owns that lot now comes to Lincoln City and they say, well, we want water. Is it your position that then the annexation would be okay for that particular lot that's not part of, that doesn't have a house on it yet? So, because under your hypothetical, you said imagine there's only a few houses in Rhodes End, and people come in, and as they come in, they ask for water, and the city says, okay, you got to annex. And that's what you said the legislator, your view was how they envision it. Today, the undeveloped lots in there, are you still taking that position that those lots should be annexed in, or
No.
would be
The
permissible?
law was passed to allow delayed annexation. The collection of the agreements would enable the city at a later date to make a decision when they had a triple majority that it was time to annex. What Lincoln City did was it saw a chance by getting the federal grant to, without much risk, much financial risk to itself, to start getting some income from selling water to Rhodes End. They didn't say at the end of 25 years we're going to annex you. There was a concurrent sanitary district set up at the same time. And in the agreement with the city, there is no 25-year mentioned. The city agreed to give sanitary service in perpetuity. Why is that? Why didn't the city insist on 25 years for the sanitary district when it was written into the law regarding the water? The reason is the state, in its wisdom, said you can go ahead and have a sanitary service offered to the territory without any limit on the time. But if you're going to give water, there has to be a 25-year limit. Don't ask me why they did that, but they did. So it wasn't the idea of the Lincoln City Council to put that 25 years in. It was state law. That's the reason they did it. Otherwise, both services would have been offered in perpetuity.
Thank you.
Okay, that is everybody that has signed up this evening to speak. Is there anyone present that did not sign up that wishes to speak? Okay. Excuse me for just a moment. Any testimony from representatives of public agencies who have not yet spoken? Okay, Kate, do you have any testimony that was, written testimony that was turned in that you'd like to recap?
Sure. So tonight, before the meeting, I put copies in front of you of a letter from Stacy and Diana Baird, Dale Morden, and Aletha Morden-Sabia. That's one letter. Mr. Baird testified last night, but wanted to follow up with an additional letter into the record. And I also gave you a printed copy of an email that was received at the end of today from Alan and Chrissy Anderton, who own 2 homes in the Rhodes End area. So that's in front of you. And then just before the meeting, I was given a copy of a letter which you do not have in front of you, but it's a printed version of testimony that was submitted to you last night, spoken testimony from Chris Jalawi.
Okay. Thank you. Joan, do you have?
I think, I know I was trying to follow the testimony last night and tonight, and planning staff was also. In the event you wanted us to follow up on either any of your questions or any of the questions that we heard were being asked of you. So I guess I need direction from you as to how you want us to do that.
Anybody? Were there any questions last night that we do have answers for already? Or
The ones,
those
there are
answers?
some that we tried to track to see if we could get those answered. If you want me to just go through
Should
them,
we
I
go
can. I can go through
Okay.
the questions that we heard. Maybe, Richard, you can do that, too.
Also, well, maybe they could just be forwarded to City Council, those questions, so they would have the answers to some of those questions when they have their hearing, or what's the best way to do that?
Well, I think they were, to the extent we can put them on the record now, they're close in time to the testimony that you heard. I think if we can, it would be appropriate to do it now rather than to
Okay.
postpone. Excuse me just a minute. I'm trying to go through my notes here. I think you had testimony from either Terry or Patricia Castor. I believe you had testimony from both of them. They own 2 properties in Rhodes End, and there was testimony that they did not sign the consent document, that the contract seller of their property had signed it. I investigated one property. This one was at 5319 Port Road, and found document 2009-08484. That's a consent to annex that was signed by Terry Castor and Patricia Castor on July 20th of 2009, and that's been recorded. I think maybe they might have confused their properties, but I'm not sure. The other property at 1838 Northeast 70th, we do not have a consent to annex on that property. So I just wanted to clarify, because that was a question that seemed to be raised. And who's the owner? Dozy? Put in front of you the correspondence that the city has on the Castor property, because I think there was a statement. I'm trying to relate this to water turnoff. Yeah, on the Sozi property, the city did not turn off that property. In fact, the Sozis were defendants in the declaratory judgment action that the city filed in federal court to determine, filed in state court, and the defendants removed to federal court to determine that the consent to annex program was valid. I believe that was filed in 2005, and the judgment was in 2008. After that judgment, the city followed up by sending, actually before and after, sending letters that should be reflected in the documentation I gave to you on that property. The letter dated August 14th, 2008, explains that the reason why they don't have water service is that the customer side of the meter had turned off their water. So it was not the city that had turned off the water, it was somebody working on the property or the property owner. Not sure. Anyway, it wasn't, the city didn't turn it off. So I was just clarifying that because there was a question about water turnoff. There was a question from Robert Herder. I think the question was, do streets have to be brought up to city standards in annexation? I think the answer is that public streets will be maintained to the extent they are maintained now as public streets. If there are improvements to that maintenance, I think that would happen the same way it does any place in the city. There are a variety of programs by which streets are improved. And I believe I put at your desk a memorandum from Sandy Gruber that shows a map. And Kate should have a copy of that. If anybody wants it, we can make that available. It's a color map showing which ones are public, because that was a question, which of these streets are public streets and would be maintained. So I hope that addresses that question. There was a question, I think, about, there was reference to my letter to the City Council, my memorandum dated September 10th, 2012, where I quoted a statement from the city manager about transportation access to Rhodes End being on city roads. I guess the issue there is the busy intersection at Logan Road. Maybe I'm making that assumption, but that's what I thought that was about. And I believe that the testimony was directed at Rhodes End would only represent a very small percentage of the traffic through that intersection. As far as I know, there are 5 developments in Lincoln City, inside the city, that are paying a traffic impact fee for, at the time somebody applies for a building permit, the additional cost that would be paid to upgrade that intersection is currently $3,941. That applies to the villages at Cascade Head, formerly Timber Shores, Lincoln Palisades, Lakeside Village, which is owned by the Siletz tribe, the Devil's Lake Motel, which I think was not developed, and the RV park. So even if, assuming Rhodes End is annexed, the existing development in Rhodes End would not be paying for improvements to that intersection. So I gave you a copy of the spreadsheet that was given to me by the Public Works Department showing the system development charges in place as of January 1st, 2012, and noting, it notes Lakeside Golf Club Estates traffic impact fee, since that's the closest one to Rhodes End. There was a question, I'm sorry, I missed the first name, but the last name was Woods, and I think the owner was questioning whether the boundary was correct or whether there was an issue with the map. He was trying to identify whether his property was inside or outside of the boundary. I think it was labeled 51st Street. And, Richard, can you clarify this one?
Yeah, that was actually a mistake on my part. I called it out as 51st Street, and it's labeled as 51st Street, but it's actually 50th Street. And so it does, the annexation area does go all the way down to the city limits along there. And as is shown clearly on the map, so if you look at the drawing, essentially, it shows that the annexation area abuts the city limits. 50th Street is misidentified as 51st, but it's actually 50th.
I have also given you a copy of Ordinance 2004-06. It was the ordinance that the city put in place after the water agreement expired in 2003, directing the policy for consents to annex. That ordinance was subsequently amended. They weren't substantial amendments in 2004 and 2005, and it was these ordinance amend sections, Chapter 13 of the City Code, 13.12, having to do with water and sewer service. And that chapter was again amended in 2010. The reason why I've given you a copy of the 2004 ordinance is because the city adopted specific findings related to Goal 14 and Goal 11. I believe it sets out some of the history of the city policies beginning in 1980. I'm looking at page 4. That talks about a memorandum regarding extension of utility service outside the city limits and outside the boundaries of the Rhodes End Sanitary District, and setting a policy. Then again in December of 1992, the Director of Public Works issued a memorandum restating the city policy for extension of utility service outside the city limits and outside the boundaries of the Rhodes End Sanitary District. Again, on September 10th, 2003, that was when the City Council approved an adjustment to those prior policies on extensions of water service to subdivided or partitioned property outside the city but within the boundaries of the old Rhodes End Water District, which are the same as the boundaries of the Rhodes End Sanitary District. And it sets forth the policy, but I wanted to just direct you to it because it gives a little bit of that history, and I think explains the policies that the city was being consistent with over time and putting in place. I also looked up, and I have just one copy in the room because somebody asked you to take judicial notice, I think, of ordinance number 77-23. I hadn't looked at that ordinance. That is an ordinance authorizing a water system improvement project known as the North of Highway 101 Water Project, providing for the financing of the same during the course of construction by general obligation improvement warrants issued by the City of Lincoln City. Without going into the history of the ordinance, the area for that improvement project was the north boundary was the Cascade Head Wilderness Area, the east boundary, Highway 101, the south boundary, Highway 101, and west along 39th Street to the ocean, and the west boundary will be the Pacific Ocean. My understanding is that that description generally would have included all of the Rhodes End area that is in the proposal before you. There was a question, I think tonight, by, I don't know if it's the same Woods who spoke last night, but Jerry Woods, whether there were electronic copies of the consents that had been filed. The answer to that is no. We have them only in paper form, which is why filling the records request has been time-consuming, and why we've been talking with those requesters about how to fill their records request. In essence, we don't know whether right now we are filling one request for the Rhodes End Water District that was brought twice by Mr. Hoover and the Rhodes End Water District, because one of the complications here is we asked for an exchange of documents with the Rhodes End Water District. The public agency to public agency cannot command the same authority of public records as individuals do to a public body, just given the definitions in the public records law. So it's a little bit different than if an individual is making that request. That was a negotiation the city was having with the district through their attorney. Without belaboring that, we're still trying to figure out how they want to do that. It's at a stalemate, quite frankly, and it may be that the city will simply produce the documents twice, which is going to be over 10,000 pieces of paper. Without belaboring that process, which is a separate process, I wanted to reiterate what I said last night, which is that any property owner who believes that they want to see the consent to annex on their property can get that immediately, I think, from the county. If a property owner wants to see theirs that they filed here at the city, we can also show them that file. It's the copying of all the documents that takes time. They're all retrieved from separate paper files. There's no electronic database here. Before you, what we have put is, I think, about a 20-page of a spreadsheet summary of all the consent documents. Without going too much into the issue of the consents per se for the triple majority, it will be the city council at the time that they adopt their ordinance, if they go forward with it. It is up to them to demonstrate that they have those consents to annex. And actually, the filing date, the filing process is that the city actually files them with the state. But in order to clarify that the city has them, we've given you that spreadsheet which documents that that there is a consent on those named properties. We do not have a spreadsheet, as far as I know, any kind of spreadsheet that would show the date signed or the other specific information that was requested, such as I don't know, there was something, a signature date, and honestly, I didn't write down what else they wanted. So we again will try to work out what gives the specific information, but that requires then the city to create a public record, which we don't have an obligation to do. But without belaboring it, trying to give the information that the Planning Commission needs and that the City Council needs to have, and we'll make sure that the actual documents are in the room at the City Council hearing, since the City Council is the one that has authority over that legislative decision whether to move forward with the triple majority annexation, and it's their obligation to hold that public hearing by statute. You want to add to that?
I'm going to add a little bit. There was a question about exactly what the significant city investment that was mentioned in the staff report was, and that's a reference principally to the investment in the water system, including expansion of the reservoir on Port Lane, the pump station there, and the Drift Creek project. None of which, as my understanding, none of which would have been required if the city did not provide water outside the city limits, specifically with regard to Rhodes End. And these items amount to about $9 million in costs, which obviously part of the benefit goes to the entire city, but and other areas of the UGB. But again, at this point, these expansions would not have been necessary were we not serving Rhodes End. Also included in the expenditures was about $400,000 for a water line to provide improved water service and fire protection to 38 properties on the east side of Rhodes End. And that was done, a couple of years ago, I guess, or maybe less than that. But anyway, again, also up on I guess it's Port Avenue. There were a couple of other comments I wanted to mention. One referred to the villages at Cascade Head being approved for 4,400 units, and that's why there was a need for the water reservoir. Actually, the villages at Cascade Head originally was approved for 1,829 units, and now it's down to about, because they gave away some land, to about 1,680 units. And the reason I'm saying about is because they haven't modified their master plan to say what they're going to do with those areas where they lost some of the land, how many units they're going to want to include in that. But I think they lost about 150 units because of transferring that land to the tribe. There also was a mention that the villages of Cascade Head receives a special tax treatment, and they don't. They get the same tax treatment as any property in the city. There's no tax deferral or anything like that. So. And as Joan mentioned, each unit in the villages at Cascade Head will be paying a special increased transportation impact fee of, right this year it's $3,941, which is something that's not paid in Rhodes End. I want to say a little bit more about the roads, about the question whether they would have to be brought up to city standards before they would be maintained. The answer is no, they wouldn't, but that the city is not going to bring them up to city standards, but the city will do necessary maintenance. So like a gravel road is not going to, the city is not going to pave the gravel road and put in curb gutter and sidewalk, but they will do occasional grading and add additional rock to make sure that the roads remain passable in good condition. So. There was Debbie Bell expressed concerns about changes in the allowed uses in Rhodes End that might prohibit VRDs. I want to emphasize again that the city is proposing no changes to allowed uses in Rhodes End. The property, if it's annexed, will continue to have the same zoning it has under the county. It will have the county zoning on it. And any possible changes would come after public notice, public hearings, opportunities for comment, and adoption of ordinances. Again, I don't anticipate, I just can't imagine any kind of substantial change. For instance, allowing commercial development. There's just no precedent for it that I know of in the city where that's happened. Again, as I mentioned last night, generally when we have done rezoning, except on a few individual pieces of property that in many cases are already developed, the zoning has been down zoning, not up zoning. In other words, we haven't been increasing the amount of commercial land. In the long run, there's been a decrease in the amount of commercial zone land. I think that's it that I have at this point. Oh, there also was a question about how to get data reflecting Rhodes End's impact on the city. The staff report goes into that to some extent, and the accompanying documentation, the memos from the department heads to the city manager, and the regional support memo prepared by the city manager go into that as well. It's, in a way, it's sort of, if you look at the city budget, you won't see anything reflecting any taxes from areas of the UGB coming into the city, even though the city provides services. So in a way, I can show you something where there isn't something, and that itself is, I think, important material. So that's all I have.
Finally, this is also a document that's on the city's website. Under the Roads End documents is the Order 06-1001 TC. This is Judge Coffin, Magistrate Coffin's decision of the U.S. District Court in City of Lincoln City versus the Roads End Sanitary District, and it summarizes the facts underlying the consent to annex program that was in effect then, and it's dated, that decision is dated April 9th, 2008. So again, that copy, that is on the city's website. Anybody can see that. And I also put a copy in front of you.
Okay. Mr. Bryson, you had a question?
You mentioned that we made improvements in that area, roughly about $9 million as far as the upgrading of the water system, and I'm assuming that was done over a period of time?
I don't know the exact dates. There's about, I think, $4 to $5 million. I'm not sure exactly how much it was for the reservoir and pump station and water line at the Port Lane site, which is in Roads End. Obviously, that serves an area larger than Roads End, but again, that didn't have to be. It wouldn't. Those changes would not have been needed if it hadn't. If we weren't serving Roads End. Or one other thing I want to mention too. People had mentioned about villages at Cascade Head. That's really why the water tank was needed. The villages at Cascade Head is in three villages, three big phases. And much of that depends on the later development, certainly the second and third phases, and actually part of the first, require the developer to put in another water reservoir as well to serve the villages specifically. I believe it was around 1 million gallon reservoir for that. But back to your question. That was done recently, the new reservoir that was put in on Port Lane, the pump station and the water line to go with it. The Drift Creek project was done a few years ago, and there was also a project to put in that water line to serve the east area on the eastern edge of Roads End up on Port Avenue. Those properties that are on septic, but put in a better water system for them. And also, at that point, they put in the fire hydrants. They had no fire protection up there before, and those fire hydrants were put in for fire protection as well. There wasn't enough pressure there for fire protection, so there wasn't any. And now, with the improved pump station, there is fire protection.
Does any other commissioners have any questions at this time?
Mr. Chair, I have one last clarification. When I was reviewing the staff report, I found, and I didn't have time to mention this to Richard, I found a reference to the Transportation Master Plan, and that's on page 14, as being in the record. And I don't know that it was our intent to actually, that it was Richard's intent to put the whole Transportation Master Plan in the record, so I just want to clarify if you know what your intent was there. Under Goal 12 Transportation, the statement is, the annexation area has been included in Goal 12 planning for the Lincoln City Comprehensive Plan. The 2005 Transportation Master Plan is a comprehensive analysis of transportation needs for build-out of Lincoln City urban growth area, including all lands within the UGB. The TMP factors in the transportation needs of the annexation area, presents a strategy for prioritizing and funding key system developments needed by 2025. The plan does not identify any needed projects within the annexation area. Extension of local streets will occur as needed in the course of the development. A copy of the TMP is included in the record for City Council deliberations. Residents in the annexation territory already benefit from an interconnected street system that seamlessly transports them from their homes to nearby places of employment, shopping, schools, and parks. So my question might clarification was limited only to whether you want to include it in the record.
I believe it was my intent, but I don't know that it's necessary.
Oh, okay.
It's not here tonight, obviously, so I don't believe it's necessary to be in the record.
Okay, so I guess I would want the record to reflect that paragraph I just read on page 14 of the staff report. We don't actually have the TMP in the record before you now. It may be added later, or a section of it may be added, but just want to make sure that that's clarified.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard, are any of these properties eligible to get their own wells, or is that not an option for them?
To be honest with you, I don't know what the rules are on wells for drinking water.
Would that go before the county and not come before the city? If a landowner wanted to put a well in, would they bring that permit before the city, or would they have to go down to the county to do that?
At this point, to the extent there would need to be a local government approval, it would have to come from the county because of that. But there may be Oregon Water Resources Board issues there too.
Right.
Okay, any other commissioners have any questions? Okay. If there is no further testimony, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the hearing's closed. Okay, commissioners, it's up to you, I guess. And I don't know, maybe I should have kind of recapped this I'm going to read this last paragraph. Okay, the recommendation, this is a legislative matter on which the City Council is asking the Planning Commission to make a recommendation. The Planning Commission is not required to adopt a recommendation or to take any specific action. Staff recommends the Planning Commission take public testimony regarding the proposed annexation, and after considering all information and testimony presented, determine whether the proposal complies with the applicable criteria. If the Planning Commission determines the proposal meets the applicable criteria, the Planning Commission should consider recommending the City Council approve annexation of the area proposed in Figure 1. The Planning Commission may also choose from one of the following alternative motions, devise your own motion, or choose not to make a recommendation. The motions that were written down here are a motion to recommend against the annexation by a triple majority consent as proposed, motion to recommend the annexation by triple majority consent as proposed, and motion to recommend the annexation with variation of what is proposed. Commissioners, we'd like to have some discussion or opinions on this. And Mr. Kidd, I'll start with you if you'd like.
Could I jump in and interject?
Yes, interject.
Just a clarification. I believe that your authority, that you're being asked generally for a recommendation on the proposal from the City Council. The extent to which you've been asked to determine whether the proposal meets the criteria, I believe that is reflecting the land use consistency requirements. In other words, is this proposal consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and any applicable policies? We also follow state law procedures in an annexation. So procedurally, we are following that. But substantively, we're looking at the statewide planning goals, those that we believe apply, the city's comprehensive plan policies, and any other criteria. I think those are all summarized in the staff report.
Okay. So, do we, commissioners, do we make comments, or is there a proposal, or a?
I get to go first, all right. All right. Now, I'm sympathetic to the people in Rhodes End and what they're going through right now. I really am. I know that obviously any time your taxes are raised, no matter where you live, that's not a pleasant thing. And I mean, we saw last night in the election where there was some proposals on the table for taxes to be raised that were voted down. It's just not a popular issue, obviously. In this case here, again, I think there's two main concerns. One is the water issue, and the other one is how the zoning is going to affect some people's property and their use of it, and specifically how the VRDs are going to be governed. I'm comfortable with the fact that I'm listening to the testimony we have in the staff report that VRD issue is not going to be an issue in any foreseeable future, because the zoning is going to be retained by the county. So if they have the zoning in order to use VRDs now, they're going to continue to be able to use their homes as a VRD. That may change when and if the city adopts a new policy on VRDs within the city itself now, as it currently stands, and then at some point that may have to be applied to Rhodes End, and then they would be under some of the city's policies. But that can happen to anywhere. That can happen anywhere. It can happen in Lincoln City. As a matter of fact, it's going to. There are going to be people, at least a few, that are going to not be able to use their homes as VRDs where they were before. But as of now, I'm comfortable that that's not going to be a big change, that the VRDs are going to be, if people use them that way, they can continue to do so under the county's zoning policy. On the water issue, and that's a sensitive one, and I understand that that's what most of the people have the concern about. I don't know that I'm not going to sit here and say it was done in the most tactful way, or from the testimony we heard, maybe it could have been done kinder and gentler. I don't know. I wasn't living in Lincoln City when this started, and I think a few of us probably weren't, and I don't think anybody was sitting on this board when that happened. However, the agreement, the city was to provide water for 25 years from 1978. That expired in 2003. I've looked through the case law. I've looked through the statutes. There's not an obligation that I can see that the city is obligated to continue providing water service outside the city limits. And so I think they're within their right to require that the people who are using that water, annex in. I think I posed the question tonight to one of the people here giving testimony that if there was vacant land that came in, and I believe if the case that Ms. Kelsey gave us tonight actually had that hypothetical in it as well, that if someone came in with vacant land and asked to hook up to water but didn't have water currently, is the city obligated to provide that water to them when, at this point when they're not within the city limits? And the answer to that, I feel, is no. I think and that's what the case law suggests as well. So it then becomes, well, what about the people who already have it? Is the city obligated to continue providing that service to them? And I can't find a legal basis for that. I think that the city is within their rights to request the annexation. It's not popular. I understand that, and I'm definitely, like I said, I'm sympathetic to how that affects people in the Rhodes End area. But I feel that the city's within its rights to do the request. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Okay, Mr. Williams.
Well, again, I'm coming late to this discussion too, being just I'm in my fourth year as a full-time resident here in the city. I am satisfied with everything that I've read, that the city has met its obligations and that this does fall within its rights to annex. I don't have a whole lot more to add to that than I know it's not popular. I've had to go through some issues with the city that I wasn't too thrilled with either. But the law being what the law is, we have to kind of go along and until we as a people decide to change those laws. So at this point, I'm satisfied.
Mr. Bryson?
Well, I wish I could deliver some happy news to the people who are here, but the way I read the materials and the way I view what I've read on different court cases, I'm kind of inclined to go along with what the city wants to do. Believe me, I was to come up with an out, but I couldn't find something that fit what I consider the proper criteria, so I'm going along with annexing the area.
Mr. Knutson?
I think annexation in the Rhodes End area is a good thing for Rhodes End. However, it is a tough pill to swallow. I've looked at all the documents to listen to the testimony. I have a lot of heartache with the way some of this stuff was done, but everything appears to be legally. There's ordinance, case study here and so forth that supports the way it was done. I may not have to like it, but it was done legally.
Michelle Shannon?
We are required to follow certain criteria in making a decision, and I am so sorry that the direction the city took in asking or requiring you guys to sign the annexation paperwork. It was done, forgive me for offending anybody, poorly by the city. I wish that it could go to a vote. I don't see where I have any possible ability to change the rules so that it can go to a vote. I wish it could go to a popular vote. It's the democratic way. I would like to see that happen, but I don't think that at this point it's not a possibility. And yeah, I'm sorry, but I have no criteria that I can go against. So.
Thank you. I also feel that the city has met the applicable criteria, and I have to support the annexation. So, that being said, would somebody like to make a motion that we recommend forwarding a proposal or a recommendation to City Council?
Mr. Chair, I'm almost inclined to put this off to another. Fellow commissioners feel about that, but there's a lot of material. I know we reviewed it, but sometimes it's a bit longer because this does have a significant effect. So if anybody would like to put it off to
Well, I feel that the information is here before us, and it meets the criteria, and I don't see that is going to change.
I would agree with you, Chair.
Pardon me?
I would agree with you.
Okay. So with that, could we have a motion, please?
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we recommend recommend to City Council that the Rhodes End area be annexed pursuant to the triple majority.
Do we have a second on that, please?
Second.
Kate, could we have a roll call, please?
Knutson?
Kate, hold on one second. Before you take the roll call, can I just clarify that that motion is based on the findings in the staff report and the associated documents?
It's based on the findings in the staff report, the supporting documentation, testimony we've had, they're based on everything we have before.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Knutson?
Yes.
Kidd?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Bryson,
Yes.
Shannon,
Yes.
Fearborn.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Oh, you want the document? You want to do that now? We're just questioning whether we can put your recommendation in writing this evening and have you review that, so we actually have a piece of paper to send to the city council.
That would be fine.
Would
We
you
can take
be
a
willing
quick
to take a...
10-minute break?
10-minute break, and then we'll
Okay.
come back?
We're going to take a 10-minute recess, and we'll come back. Thank you.
folks.
Okay, Commissioners, we were just given a copy of the final recommendation for the matter of the proposed annexation to Rhodes End, case file ANEX 2012-01, and its final resolution 2012-01. Do we have a motion to approve this?
We approve final recommendation to council annexed area. Our number 2012-01.
Okay. Do we have a second, please?
I'll second it.
Roll call, please, Kate.
Shannon?
Yes.
Adams?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes.
Kidd?
Yes.
Bryson?
Yes.
Dearborn?
Yes. Okay. Next, any old business?
Old business.
No old business. Any new business?
New business.
Okay, reports and comments from the Community Development Director.
Full report or comment?
Next meeting.
Get into that. That's later.
Joan, do you have anything?
I don't.
Commissioners? Okay.
Yeah, I would. I'm sorry. I would like to throw in just, this was a tough process for everybody, but I thought it went well. I was impressed with the controlled emotions of most of the people testifying and in the audience, the deep, losing my words here, just how the actual interest and integrity of the commission in listening and weighing the evidence, and I was impressed with that, and I was proud to be part of this. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we have, next is public comments on non-agenda items not involving planning, the public hearing. Nothing? You, sir, nothing? Okay. Next, future, pardon me? Just a voyeur. Yeah, okay. Next, future agenda items in the next meetings.
Hey, there will not be a meeting on November 20th, so the next meeting will be December 4th. And we have a public hearing scheduled on a zoning ordinance amendment relating to the Clear Vision area at Corners. Also, two other public hearings, one on a conditional use permit for a doggy daycare facility, and one for an auto sales facility. So 3 hearings that night.
3 hearings that night? There's only one on my page.
It's a dynamic situation.
It's a dynamic situation. Okay. Is there anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Commissioners, we're adjourned.
The meeting scheduled for the 2nd.